The government says this white paper will fix S.E.ND. However, is one key component missing? Without supervision, is this just pressure with better branding? Let's unpack that today. Today on Between Two Psychs, I'm joined with Mike and Gillian Godwin. Welcome back, Gillian. You are our first returning guest. We're very glad to have you.
Thank you very much for inviting me back. I'm very happy to be here.
Excellent. It's a very timely invite because the white paper has just dropped. It's been fresh for about 2 or 3 days. We have each of us in our own time have been trying to unpack it and what does it mean? And obviously your research is very important within this, but supervision wasn't mentioned a lot in the white paper, if at all. So is it the missing ingredient?
I think it probably is. And the research that I did, as you are aware, was very much about emotional well-being and emotional intelligence and how teachers use that emotional intelligence to help them cope with the difficulties of their role. And um, this white paper is going to have quite an impact, I think, just and on schools as we all try and get our heads round how it's actually going to look in real life. And some of the research that I had that caused concern was teachers saying that some policies didn't match the need of the pupils, and that was very frustrating. So, one of the emotions that teachers are dealing with daily is a very frustrated kind of feeling. They know what the children need, they don't have the resources to provide what the children need. There's a lot of bureaucracy around education at the moment. And another thing that was mentioned was cognitive overload, not just for teachers, but for students and pupils as well. So I think the emotions and the pressure that this white paper could provide or add on to teachers' usual workload, it does seem that having supervision or some support for teachers just still doesn't seem to be recognised.
Yeah. And for me, the white paper is changing the direction of the educational ship, so to speak. So, under the Tory government led by David Cameron, the emphasis was on attainment, the core skills. They were very keen to rise up in the PISA rankings. So, it was a very much an economy based education system. This white paper seems to be putting more of a focus on inclusion and addressing the SEND crisis. Now, for me, without getting into too much details, I felt like the general tone was good, but there was some misinformation or well-intentioned but misguided information in the sense that they still talk about behaviorism in a way, and the emphasis on belonging isn't fully thought out yet. I felt now for teachers, they recognize that teachers have one of their surveys, they said something like majority of teachers do not feel confident teaching children with SEND. This is where I wonder if supervision naturally sits, bringing in that expert at hand model, as they call it, to offer that systems change and high quality CPD alongside not just head teachers, not just Senkos, but teachers on the ground as well. But they haven't mentioned that. They've just said they're going to give them additional training. Now, the funding behind that is another topic altogether. At this point, I just want to bring Mike into the conversation because I know he's got a few opinions on this and I want to make sure that he gets them out there. Mike, what do you think?
Thanks, Adam. I agree with everything that both of you said so far. And connected to Gillian's research, I am thinking about the role of the experts at hand that has been mentioned in the paper. And the intended impact of experts at hand is about supporting staff to understand the challenges that are going on rather than a child-specific intervention plan. So the pressure that might put on teachers is something that I think we need to consider with regard to Gillian's supervision research.
Yes, absolutely. And just leading on from that, I do believe that there are teachers and teaching assistants that haven't really had the amount of training that has been needed in the past. About 6 or 7 years ago, I did some training in school with teaching assistants. And these teaching assistants were dealing with those children who have really complex needs. And they were finding it very, very hard to actually cope with what they classed as rudeness from the children. You know, this child would say, "Go away, leave me alone." And I actually did training with window of tolerance. I don't know if you know window of tolerance. I got it from Beacon House. And I shared that with the teaching assistants so that they could suddenly try and put themselves in the child's perspective, in the child's situation, and understand that this child wasn't actually being rude to the teaching assistant. They were actually in fight or flight mode. But it was very clear that because these people who were working hard for these children, trying to do their best, felt like they were failing the child, to be perfectly honest, because they couldn't help them at that time. And what they were crying out for was strategies of how to deal with children who are having these difficulties. So I do welcome some of the training, but again, it needs to be quality training. And that expert at hand, somebody who can provide supervision to help people process their emotions and also foster a feeling of belonging amongst the staff as well. We're all in this together, is going to be, I think, quite vital.
I think it absolutely is. And the I love when they talk about training as if it's going to fix everything. The developmental psychology hasn't changed in God knows how long, ever. People are the same. They go through the same processes all the time. Yet we always come back to training. The thing we do know about training is that it's very good for short-term motivation. It is very bad for long-term practice change.
Yeah.
And the long-term practice change has to come from a systems-wide input. And although we're talking about supervision today, there's other aspects that need to be put into that. My own model looks at the systems diagnostics, but we won't get into that today. But within supervision, that you've just demonstrated, you've had a professional conversation with that TA who then was able to absorb some of that, apply it within their practice, and change their behaviors as a result. As a result of that, the relationship with the child changes. The child then and it's only because you give the correct nugget at the correct time, rather than a whole broadsheet of information that they then have to cipher through, which is what training does.
Absolutely. The training has to be very, very specific. And I think the best kind of training that is provided is when you get something from it that you can use tomorrow. You know, so you've got those ideas and you've got that understanding and you think, right. And then, as you said, that motivates in a positive way the reaction and the feeling of tomorrow, I can cope with this, the self-esteem that then is, and the self-worth that is then evolved and evoked, is all very, very positive. And just having people being able to discuss in a psychologically safe place, to discuss their fears, to discuss what they feel they're not doing right, to actually give them support so that the next day they can improve and see an improvement and the relationship. And it just snowballs, doesn't it? It just snowballs into something that helps everybody involved with that child.
You mentioned psychological safety there, and I want to just bury down into that a little bit, because with these systems changes, and one of the things that the white paper addressed was that, particularly around progress 8, that there was increasing the number of managed moves. And it was because of the pressures put on the secondary school system that they were behaving in a way that was not in the interests of children. That's in the white paper. Now, if we take in supervision, last time you were on, we talked about the need for a skilled practitioner. And I'd argue one that is separate to the system of the trust, because you said psychological safety. If you are a third party, you have no authority over whether that person gets promoted or demoted, or whether they get a pay rise or their performance metrics. So that psychological safety can be actually embedded then.
Yes.
And this is what I wonder if some of the funding around I think it was the Mike knows a bit more about the funding side than I do at the moment, but that 1.4 billion they talked about, that might go towards funding that expert or hands model, or funding, allowing trust to buy in professionals that they see, like I mentioned the last time we were on, Talking Heads is a good national organization that does that type of work already. Mike, I want to bring you in because you have a better scope on the funding side than I do.
I'm not that far in front of you, Adam, I have to say.
It feels like you are.
The funding, it's how it's going to be used and interpreted by the schools rather than where the actual funding's coming from. Just ties in with a question that I had in my head for you, Gillian. So head teachers are now looking at a team of staff. They've got this money that Adam's referring to, and they're considering what sort of support packages are needed to help the teachers. And some of them might be sort of connected to the self-determination theory research, where we're looking at about the ability of individuals to make choices and to determine their own actions. So when you look at your situation, if we call it supervision or any other word, we want to make sure that those packages that are available to the staff, A, help them make choices, but B, also help them to decide their own actions. And from what you're saying, if I'm hearing you right, there's almost two prongs. One is a skills supervision and one is an emotional supervision. Would that be fair?
Yes, I think so. Yeah, I think so. There's some other supervision networks that I've actually got involved in since we last met. So there's Supervision in Education Network, and they've actually come up with some guidelines for quality standards of supervision, which I'm more than happy to share with people if they would like a copy of it. And
Is that the one from St. Mary's?
It is. It is, yeah. And what I like from that document is that there is a quality standard, that in order to provide this quality expert at hand supervision, they've come up with a document. It's their first one. It's an initial one. I think it's going to be reviewed again in a next year or two. But some of those skills that the supervisor will need in order to provide that quality supervision. And I've also joined a community of community of practice supervision in education by educators, so that you have got those supervisors who actually know what it's like to be in the current climate in education, and so already have those skills to actually understand the difficulties. Skills and emotional, is it two-pronged, or do they coexist side by side? That's a really good question, actually, Mike. Obviously, I think from my research, which was really looking at the emotional side of teacher retention, there is a big thing about the emotional drain and difficulty of working just every single day in a school environment. But then I think there are also skills that you can teach people in order to cope with those emotions and have strategies and little ideas to actually help them regulate themselves, actually, for the teachers to regulate their own emotions. I just have a little side story here, which people might find quite amusing. I was talking with a friend recently, and they were talking about how their mind worked and how they were very methodical, and in their workplace they planned, and it went from this step to this step to this step, and it was all very logical, and it was all very in order, and it was all very neat. And I was saying my brain is all over the place when I'm in the classroom. I've got my presentation behind me and I'm trying to think about what's on the next slide. I'm thinking of questions to extend some of the children. I'm thinking out questions that will actually support those children on the S.E.ND register. I'm also watching the child over there who doesn't look happy today. And there's another child at the back with a great big happy birthday badge that's actually probably bigger than themselves, who is just jumping around because it's their birthday. And then there's somebody on the floor picking up a rubber. And all of these things are all all going on at the same time. I'm trying to instill a concept in kind of 29, 30 different ways. And so kind of understanding that kind of emotional impact and the energy and how exhausting that is, I think is really quite important for people to understand.
Absolutely, it is. So that, I think, coming back to Mike's original. Oh, sorry, before we move on, Gillian, if you send across that framework, we can put it in the show notes so people
Yeah,
can just click on it.
I'll do that.
And thank you. Mike, what are your thoughts
About what, Adam?
about everything Gillian said? That balance between the emotional and the practice side, you know, because one of the dangers of this new white paper that I'm taking from it is that it becomes very much just a trust led, as in you have these national trusts who are beholden to the trust framework, and Ofsted checks in every so often. If Ofsted are not keen on or not clued up on the inclusion and the value for money and the community collaboration frameworks, these trusts might not be held to account. And what we really want to do is fix the education system with the primary importance put on the S.E.ND system. Sorry, is that
Okay, so that's really clear. Thanks, Adam.
keep going.
It's
And
just,
the only thing about having him on, this people, you don't know how hard it is being me because he does this all the time. He dead airs me a lot.
it just shows it's just very, very complex, isn't it? Everything is so complex. And unfortunately, the system at the moment isn't working. And I think everybody recognizes that, and the government recognize that. It's not something that we can kind of change overnight. But I'm kind of the whole my golfing enterprises kind of thought at the moment is prevention rather than cure. What can I do tomorrow that is just going to help in a small way to keep good teachers teaching, to keep those students learning, to keep to keep education as best as it can be in these very difficult times. We all know that it needs more resources. We all know it needs more money being put into it. That's not going to happen tomorrow. So is actually supervision just that thing that we can get organised quite quickly, quite soon, that will give support to teachers so that teachers feel that they can cope, they know where they're going, they have strategies to help these S.E.ND children, they're feeling more confident with the way that they cope with some of the complex behaviours that they're meeting. So it's kind of, I'm not saying a quick fix, I don't mean a quick fix, but I'm just thinking of what's the next step that we can do quite quickly to actually try and support.
I think you're spot on. And sorry, Adam, I didn't mean to dead air you. That means I'm going to get hate mail now.
All right, mate.
You were very popular.
Just for me. Go on, what are you saying, mate?
But I think that's based on what you're saying there, Gillian. I totally agree with you. And I'm the word that pops to my mind as a leader of teams would be containment. You know, because when you're faced with something like this, the first thoughts are, well, what do I do and how do I do it? You're right. There isn't something that's going to change by tomorrow or Monday morning. So it is containing that. And it takes me back to a recent guest, Andrew Curran, and the neurologist that I was telling you about. And he was strong, really strong about the power of relationships, because the power of relationships will relate to what he called the emotional brain. And the emotional brain has huge control over dopamine and its impact on how we feel and therefore what we think and do. So that aspect of containment and relationships from a leadership point of view, as I see it, is really important at the moment, just to steady the ship.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I think that's vital. And one of the things that came out of the white paper was the impact on headship around the emotional burden of being a head teacher. And I think supervision, as in that sort of expert-led supervision, has the potential to alleviate some of that burden. Many of the schools that I go into support, the heads are feeling that extra pressure. And if they have an ally and someone who's going, look, I am an educational psychologist, or I'm an ex-head teacher who's done extra training on supervision, I can support your staff on a weekly, monthly basis, whatever it is, and just help just guide the good practice stuff a bit. It means that the head teacher can just take that step back and think more about, have I got your policies in place? Have I got my finances in place? Have I got my leadership roles in place? Because it's that simple stuff that's really sounds really boring to your layperson, but when you go into a school and that's not in place, chaos reigns.
Yeah.
And that's what I'm hoping this. It hasn't laid it out well enough for me, but the fact that it's got emphasis on inclusion and it's got emphasis on community collaboration, I'm hoping that, and it's got an emphasis on sharing experience and knowledge.
Yes.
Now, the danger is that it becomes within trust, these multi academy, the big ones. And I think it tries to make it very clear that they have to engage with the community. It just needs to be a bit clear about what that engagement looks like. I feel because they got these two big pockets of money, these 1.4 and 1.6 billion, and it's not entirely, to me, it's not entirely clear how that's going to be spent in the short term. They're going to focus on these inclusion bases, but you can set up an inclusion base that actually becomes a seclusion base, as in the children go there and they stay there all the time. What we really need is, with things like good supervision, good diagnostic assessments around systems, to support teachers how to bring those kids back into the mainstream
Yeah.
class, particularly those secondary levels and those teachers who self-identify as, I'm not confident with S.E.ND. How do I bring this back around? And coming back full circle to Mike's point, relationships are key, and that doesn't come out at all in the white paper. They talk about inclusion, but they talk about it in a very behavioral way. Like, you will come into my class and there will be routine and structure. Let's just make this clear. If you're a teacher, you teach second, you build a relationship first.
Yes.
Relationships are key. Mike said it before with the dopamine stuff. Andrew Curran said it last week, or how many weeks ago he was on. And you build a relationship first. That is your primary job as a teacher. I know I'm going to be pissing a lot of people off saying that, but that is your primary role.
No, I think that's absolutely true. That's exactly right, because without that relationship, you're not going to get those pupils learning. It's as simple as that. And I think that first week in September is basically built up. All of it is about setting your routines, setting out the behavioural expectations, and building those relationships. And actually, it starts before September. Quite a lot of schools will have transition, and the children that are going to a new teacher will meet that new teacher in June or July, and you start building that relationship then. And then just before school opens, quite often schools will have an inclusion day and send children come into school, maybe on the inset day, and see their classroom, see where it's set up, see where their peg is. And all of that is to build that relationship and to make sure that child, through transition, is feeling safe, starting something which is very, very, very new. So I think you're absolutely right. Relationships throughout schools, not just with, pupils, but among the team, among SLT, among parents. It's absolutely vital if you're going to be successful. Absolutely.
100%, Gillian. I totally agree. And I would take everything you've just said relating to children and then apply it from the SLT across the team in a school. Everything.
Yeah. Yeah. You need to feel that I think, in my experience and my opinion, I think you need to feel, the children obviously need to feel safe, but the teachers also need to feel safe. TAs need to feel safe. If you are feeling insecure about how you are going to teach a specific child, you need to be able to go to your S.E.ND team, your SENCO, and say, I'm not feeling confident with this. Can you help me? And that only comes from building those relationships and having that safe space where you you feel you can do that without feeling, oh my goodness me, they're going to judge me. They're going to think I can't do my job. I can't admit that I can't do this, or I'm not sure about this because of how that's going to be viewed. So, it needs to be a real open door policy. We're all in it together. We're all in it together, and we all really, at the bottom of it, all want the same things. So, actually having those relationships throughout the school and the community is, just very, very important.
You are right to say we are in it together. This is Adam used this frame off recording, which was team around the school, and I like that. But we are in it together, and one of the responsibilities that people like head psychs have to adapt, harmonise with what you're saying, is to move away from the traditional form of individual child assessment and more towards the problem-solving consultation, which is an empowerment approach. And it's the Senko's duty to, as a senior member of staff, to be encouraging teachers that this is an empowerment process. It's not a finger-pointing process.
Yeah.
And you will lead the consultation with more awareness of things to do with children who generally present with this type of profile. So it's coming back to that, is it a skills supervision or an emotional supervision? It's the package in general that we all develop as a team around the school.
And I love that word empowerment. I think that's a really great word. I think that should be, a word that we use more frequently, I think, in the education. Empowerment of the teachers, empowerment of the pupils. Yes, I really like that word, Mike. That's good.
Yeah, it absolutely is. And, for anyone listening, empowerment is not one of these vague things. There are frameworks around it. And one of the key things is about clarity of role and the autonomy to carry out that role. And supervision is the best place in order to explore that clarity, because you can make mistakes in supervision and there's no real consequence, especially if we're talking about that expert-led, self-contained, what did you say, psychological safety. So the teacher who doesn't know much about SEND can make, I don't know this, I don't know that, and be very honest about it.
Yeah.
And then through good supervision, that role becomes much clearer. You start off where that person is. I'm going to empower you by giving you the autonomy to practice what I'm going to teach you. And it's like your knowledge base is limited in this area. I'm going to teach you a bit about that. And then we're going to talk first about how you're going to apply that. And that could be something as simple as how to use visual communication strategies. Some teachers might not be skilled up in that. Others might be, I don't know how to use a script very well for those who have social emotional needs. Or you might have a teacher who has come across Down syndrome for the very first time in their teaching. It's like, this is a condition I'm not familiar with. Can you give me some information, knowledge that I can then adapt my practice? And that is the beauty of supervision versus training. Training, you can sit down for an hour and a half and learn about all the different types of Down syndrome, all the different needs that come out of it. But then you've got to take that and assimilate into your practice yourself. A supervisor comes alongside you. He's like, I'm going to mold this a bit with you, and we're going to get there much quicker together. And that feeds into the collaboration aspect of this white paper. However, if anyone in the government's listening, it needs to be clear. It is so vague at the moment. And I understand it's open to consultation. I'm going to be on it, and I'm going to be the biggest pain in their ass probably. But it needs to be clear about what this expert at hands looks like, what the commissioning processes look like, especially if we're moving towards the big multi-academy trust things. Make the commissioning clear. What is the role of the LA as well? It's in there. I didn't understand half of it. Well, I did. But what I'm getting at is it's not clear enough about all these different organizations and how this community collaboration is going to fit out. And I know I'm getting on my high horse, and Mike's just let out a big sigh, but if these are not clear, then the child at the end of the day suffers. And that is what happened with the Children and Families Act.
And I think, again, it's the devil is in the details. Where are the details? It sounds, oh, this is going to be great. This is going to be lovely. But where are the details? And that, I'm agreeing with you, Adam, is really, really key, because when it's really clear and you have those details, you can picture how you're going to implement it. And then suddenly you go, oh, I can actually see how this is going to work. I can do this, this, and this. That's going to help out there. Then I can do this. And you have a clear path. And if you have a clear path, it's just like teaching a lesson. You know, if you know what you're teaching, you've got a clear path that you know exactly, the lesson goes really well because you have that structure and you know what you're going to actually be doing.
And if Bridget Phillipson's listening, you can get a free consultation with me on dradammccartney.com.
Thanks, Adam. Let's moving on. Let's also plug Gillian. Gillian, your research is really interesting.
Gillian's got a website too. Yeah, come on, Gillian, get your plugs in.
So, well, actually, my company Goldfinch Enterprises obviously is working very hard to support teachers, and it's training and emotional well-being and psychological principles. But I am actually going down the route of learning next to become a supervisor. So that's now, I've kind of been inspired since the last time we spoke, and last
might be.
You know, a few other networks. So that's one of the things that I am actually now going to add an extra string to my bow. So
excellent. Is your research available anywhere, Gillian, for people to look at if they wanted to?
Yes, they can get in touch with me, and I'm quite happy to send my dissertation out to people. It's me at gilliangoodwin.co.uk. So it's quite an easy email to remember. I've already sent it out to a couple of people that have requested it. So yes, I'm more than happy to share it. It's not actually published, but I'm more than happy to share it. Yeah.
Thanks, Gillian. And thanks, Adam. Do you want to do any more plugs, Adam, before we go?
Well, I do have one. If you want to have someone sigh in your ear for an hour, go on to ridgewaypsychology.co.uk. Thank you, Gillian. Thank you, Mike.
Thank you, Adam. Thanks, Gillian.
Thank you, both. Nice seeing you again.
Bye.